Well, welcome divas and dudes to Powerhouse Bakery. Happy New Year. I'm so excited to get to share with you again today. We are going over vitamins. And thank you to the divas that make requests and recommendations, because that's, really what we love, is to answer your questions and to be able to really be specific on what you're looking for and how do we really dig into making your best foods even better with the foods that you pick based on what we're learning. So please keep sending in your requests and your ideas and, of course, questions, because I love to be able to follow that up with you. I'm going to flip my board around because I'm going to do a quick review of vitamin D, because really what we're trying to look at is, does our food make the cut? The USRDA cut, that is. And so the recommended daily allowances are really based on how we should get nutrients from our foods. And so I think it's a really great question. What do we eat in order to make sure we get all the nutrients, and can that really be done? Probably the short answer is that yes, it can, but the processing of foods, which is such a part of our culture, breaks down the nutrients so much that it does make it difficult. And so we talked a little bit last week about vitamin D, and I gave you all homework, so I'm wondering if it worked for you, if you were able to do it. And that was to track how much vitamin D did you get, what foods did you use, and if you didn't even use the app, that's okay. Just picking out foods that we knew were high in vitamin D based on our discussion. So I hope that you did that, and I'm going to share mine with you because I did it, and it was a good learning experience. So kind of as we remember the complexity of vitamin D, that's why I kind of left this one in place, because all of the vitamins are really cofactors, they're enzymes, they're all about biochemistry. And I tell you, I had so much fun studying for this week's class on the B vitamins, because that brought back memories of my physiochemistry and learning about the Krebs cycle. And so any of you that have ever taken any science, those names should ring some bells. But for vitamin D, we talked about the sun changing a chemical that's in our skin to the active form of vitamin D that floats around in the blood, and then it needs to get reactivated when it goes through the liver and then again to the kidney, so that then the usable form of vitamin D can be in the blood. And so there's a lot of factors going on in getting enough vitamin D. And even when we had the whole COVID epidemic, we were so concerned about our immune system. How do we improve it? How do we make sure we don't get nasty viruses that can be so detrimental? And so vitamin D started to really come up into the news, and we started seeing supplements on every corner. When HEB opened again, to try to encourage people to use vitamin D. And when we first think of vitamin D, we think of it primarily doing what? Strengthening bones. And what we realize is that all vitamins have so much more to do than just strengthening bones or one thing. And so when we get into the B vitamins, you're going to find out that there's so many things that it's involved in. And so I'm definitely going to need a second day for the B vitamins, because there's so much going on. Even like with this one, really to give it a one-day overview isn't enough. But the take-home message is that we definitely want to look at how much we get if we decide to take a supplement. There's a lot of debate over how much we should take, if any. Should we get it into our food, or should we just have it in a supplement? Is the sunshine more valuable in getting the vitamin D that we need versus a supplement? So lots of issues around it. No easy answer. And so what I really want is to be able to look at individual questions and be able to help you decide on what basis should we decide to supplement. Too much vitamin D can cause problems, just like too little. So the RDA, so the daily recommended amount of vitamin A for a 1-year-old is 400 IUs. 1 to 70 is 600, 800 for elderly. And of course, your demands go up as you get a little older. And why is that? Not because we're building new bone, but because the absorption is decreased. And so we're going to see that with the B vitamins as well. When you have extending circumstances, the needs for that vitamin go up. And so we talked a little bit about rickets. Why do we see that in a little child versus brittle bones, which we see in adults, and osteomalacia? So the bad bone, basically brittle, we see in adults. And that's because really what happens in the physiology when a child doesn't have enough vitamin D, that's because their bones have not really stored enough calcium to make this whole process work to build strong bones. So they get rubbery, versus an adult has enough calcium in their bones, but if the physiology doesn't work with the vitamin D, it still becomes a brittle bone. So a lot of physiology around it. We talked a little bit about how important the comparison is with calcium and phosphorus, and how the parathyroid hormone is so key in turning on this mechanism with vitamin D. We learned about how you want to eat fatty foods because that's where the vitamin D is, and also it helps with the absorption. So, in a nutshell, really what I wanted to talk about with vitamin D is that there's a lot of science and biochemistry around it. And when it boils down to it, we know that getting enough vitamin D is super important for many of our body processes. We know that when your vitamin D is low, you have risk factors for many other diseases. And so now when we switch gears and we start thinking about the B vitamins, anybody want to guess what B vitamin? Can you think of one, perhaps? Yeah, B12. I'm so glad you thought of that one. We're going to work backwards. And it's interesting that the Bs are all numbered. You'd think, okay, if there's a B12, there must be a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 all the way, right? And it started that way, but then we found out that some of the vitamins are actually made in your body. So we don't really have to have them as a vitamin that we need from an external source. So B12 is cobalamin. So we've got a B12, cobalamin, and similar to vitamin D, B12 also is found in animal products. So fish, so shellfish, of course. Salmon, is really the darling of the nutrition world, and we all know that, right? We know that salmon is a fatty fish, which carries with it the fat-soluble vitamins, and that's why we talked about it last week with vitamin D. It's also going to be a great source of vitamin B12. When we think about how much do we need, and I had to bring my notes because I memorized the amounts, but I didn't memorize them to stick with me for 50 years. So, not quite 50, but so for B12 is 2.4 micrograms. And remember, there's these little units when we look at the amounts is really tricky, because we often think of milligrams, like if you take a medicine, it's in milligram amounts. Micrograms are exponentially smaller, so tiny amount is needed of B12. And then if we go to some of the other Bs, so if we look at B9, and B9 we don't really think of as B9, we actually think of that one as folate. And folate needs 400 micrograms. So there again, that little upside down U and a G is micrograms, so really small amounts. And what does folate do? Anybody know?
Your hair.
Yeah, it's connective tissue, sure.
I'm sorry. Is that the same as folic acid?
Yeah, it's a different form. And I'm so glad you brought that up, because when we start talking about the B vitamins, there are different forms that enter our metabolism for different functions. And so when I talked about energy in the Krebs cycle, it's so cool when we think about how important the Krebs cycle is. That's basically how each of our little cells of our body create energy. So if you've heard of the mitochondria, inside the mitochondria is where the B vitamins do their job to make energy, so ATP. So yeah, the different forms essentially will flux throughout our body, but we'll just call it folate because it's hard to remember the B9 anyway. So folate, 400 micrograms. And then when we go to B7, that one is biotin. Now, when you were pregnant, you had to make sure you had enough folate because it was really important in the neural tube in the developing fetus. We didn't want neural tube defects because all three of these are really important in the neurodevelopment, not just of the fetus, but of course throughout our lifespan. So really important in neurofunctioning. And so how much biotin do we need? This is 30 micrograms. So again, I'm kind of going through these because they're such a small amount and they have such important jobs. So also they're involved in the developing red blood cells, important in hormones, so the developing hormones and really working through the body. We have to have each of these B vitamins in order to get to the active form to do its job throughout the body. So B6 is pyridoxine, PR. So again, these are fun words and it's kind of fun to know what they are, but we oftentimes think of it as B complex. And unlike vitamin D that we talked about being in the fat soluble form, meaning that it's stored in our fats, the B complex vitamins are water soluble. So that means we have to replenish them often. So even though these microgram amounts are really small, and even now as we go to B6, pyridoxine, a milligram amount, so exponentially more is needed, they are not stored in our fat. So it means we have to eat them often. And the good news is B vitamins are ubiquitous. They're in so many foods. We feel like, okay, well, surely we're going to get enough, right? Very small amount in lots of different foods. And that's usually the case. I mean, it's pretty rare for us to ever have seen a B vitamin deficiency, but we do see symptoms that might be related to a subclinical deficiency or not quite enough. So our body's struggling a little bit and it's hard to tell because the symptoms will be something like a skin rash or a headache or nausea. How many reasons we can have those things, right? And so it's really a tough one to know. But B6 is pyridoxine, and we're going to keep going. Here's B5, and that's pantothenic acid. Pantothenic acid, that's a mouthful, right? So notice that this one is identified as an acid and none of these are. And again, it's such a good point. It's really where its active form is and how that key component makes it available in the body. So B5 pantothenic acid, we need 5 milligrams. And then we miss one, so we've gone 5, 6, 7. We didn't have B8. What happened to that one? And now we're going to skip 4 and we're going to go to B3. B3 is niacin. I bet you've heard of that one. So I'll talk about these in a minute. Why don't we have a B4 and a B8? But niacin, anybody hear of niacin? Yes. Anybody know somebody that takes niacin? Yeah, for heart health, maybe? Yes. And years ago when I used to sell supplements, which is so ironic, we would recommend, niacin for heart health. And we would say, now don't worry, you're going to get a niacin flush, which means you get this flushing, like hot feeling. And now we know that's the signs and symptoms of too much niacin. It's not good for you to have that flush, right? We all know we don't want hot flashes, no niacin or either way. But it's funny that we would kind of warn the patients that you're going to get this. And now we know that that's really not advisable. So B3, and then we've got 2 more. We've got B2. And so B2 is riboflavin. Where do you think you get riboflavin, or what's it for? Anybody know? Yeah, it's fortified foods, right? And you often hear of milk being a good source of vitamin D and riboflavin. There used to be a commercial that said that, I'm almost sure, because I remember hearing it. But so riboflavin, B2. And then lastly, B1 is thiamine. So even when I was in college, undergrad, I was pre-med. So, we learn about the biochemistry around vitamins, and we learn about how important they are in the Krebs cycle and really creating energy for our body. And then, as the years progress, it became even more profound to me that the foods that we eat are absolutely important in allowing our body to use that food for energy. And so the B vitamins that are ubiquitous in so many foods are so important in allowing our body to utilize that food for energy. So it makes perfect sense now, but learning about the Krebs cycle, I didn't have nearly as much of an understanding and appreciation, really. So as I was going through YouTube and learning about the Krebs cycle again, it made me really think about how much we let go unnoticed in our bodies. We're just not aware of how much is going on in the conversion of these beautiful vitamins that we get in food, and it makes our bodies run so smoothly. And so low energy, headache, skin rash, GI upset, all those, kind of vague symptoms that we often feel could in fact be because one of those systems in our body isn't working perfectly. And to me, that's just like, well, gosh, no surprise. It's so complicated. So let's look at getting B vitamins in foods. So anybody want to throw out an idea of where we might get vitamin D in foods? I'm sorry, B vitamins. The B's. I said they were ubiquitous, so you could have just guessed anything, right? Whole grains. My pen is going to run out. So what do I mean by whole grains?
Bread.
Yes. Okay, bread, oatmeal. What else? And see, this is where we get caught up, because right now we're stuck in the world of carbs being bad, especially as cancer survivors. We don't want anything to turn into sugar. And so we kind of wipe off this whole component. And we do have a risk of not getting enough B vitamins if we take out this food category. So if we think of bread, that's a very good one. But the problem is, what kind of bread do we often have? White bread, even stone ground wheat bread. What's the problem there? It's processed. So the cooking process and the breakdown, the highly modified form of the grain loses a lot of that water-soluble vitamin. So anytime it's cooked and really changed, the amount of the vitamin is going to really decline. So it begs the question, where could we get some whole grains? Well, have you ever tried millet? I'm going to ask Mary for another pen. Mary, could you find me my pen's running out. It looked fine earlier. Thank you so much. So millet, sorghum. Now, we used to make a sorghum salad here at Powerhouse Bakery, and it was delicious. So it really got me thinking about other ways to create whole grain dishes. Quinoa is another one. That's a whole grain. It kind of lives in the middle, though, because it's also sort of a seed. But I love the fact that millet is a grain that you could make with a cereal. Those of you that participated in our exploration around the Mediterranean, and we had a guest speaker that came in and did a millet salad for us. It was a little bitter, it was a little hard, so as we kind of worked with her, we thought, yeah, I probably could have cooked it a little more. She was unfamiliar with the type that we had, but needless to say, it's a great option. Did you find one? Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you. But we could always go back to oatmeal, which is absolutely a great whole grain that's really not been processed. In addition to sorghum, we could also do rice. So it's a grain. So let's bring brown rice, wild rice back into our diet because it is a great source of the B vitamins. If you've never done anything with barley, that's another really great whole grain. I know in the cookbook that somebody of you had from the nutrition class years ago, our beautiful Wendy, she had a granola, I think, right? That she had with barley. I think so. And if not, let me know and I'll find you one because I use it at home. And it just so happens that these are also gluten-free. Now, I don't profess that you have to be gluten-free to get your B vitamins by any stretch, but so much of the wheat that we have in our food sources has been highly refined. So then we miss out on some of those B vitamins. So it's really cool.
On the oatmeal, is it any type?
Yes, any type of oatmeal. I mean, of course, when you chop it more or you pre-steam it, so instant or even the ones that are in the little containers that have flavors and, you just add hot water, that's going to be more processed than the steel cut or the thick sliced oats. But they're still going to be better than the breads that we typically go to. And what's kind of nice too is the sprouted grain breads are, popular and more people are finding them. It's not just the Ezekiel bread. There's another couple of brands that we could experiment with. And what's nice is it's really held on to the B vitamins in those whole grains. So the next category is eggs. I'm telling you, since my vitamin D experiment, I've been eating eggs more. And it's funny how eggs go in and out of style, in the healthcare arena. Then back in the 80s when I was in college, we were saying, oh, you can have 1 to 3 eggs a week if you've had heart disease. You can have maybe 5 if you're healthy. And, I see my son come home to visit and he has 7 eggs every morning, and he's strapping, strong guy, and it doesn't seem to affect him. But it's amazing how they go in and out. So eggs are not only high in vitamin D, like we learned last week, they're also a great source of the Bs. So using eggs becomes a great way to add protein to the morning and some healthy fats. So give me some ideas of how you might cook and serve an egg for your meal. You could have it with some whole grain. So you could have it with your bread if you find one that's whole grain. You could cook it in some extra oil or even some butter, because we know that the vitamin D as well as the B vitamins are absorbed better when there's fat in the picture. And you could have some vitamin C along with that meal. So you could add some salsa or you could have some orange juice, right? And so now you've just gone from good to great in your meal planning because you've got better vitamin D absorption because of the orange juice and better iron because of the orange juice combination with the protein, and you've got your B vitamins covered with your whole grain as well. This morning I did something very similar because I was thinking about you guys. So I made quinoa and egg omelet. And it was actually really good. So funny story, we were out of bread, no Ezekiel bread in the freezer, and that was like a cardinal sin at the Ryman house. But I got creative. So I put the 3 eggs in my hot skillet. Well, actually, hot skillet, added a little bit of butter, let it melt. I added the 3 eggs, let them cook a little, and I spooned some dressed quinoa on the top. And it cooked in. It was so delicious. It looked like a little omelet. And so I was thinking about you guys because when we combine a whole grain and we even can combine some other vitamin C, that's going to help absorb all of those nutrients. So it really makes sense to think outside the box. Instead of your typical, piece of toast, egg, and bacon, right? Maybe we could change it up a little bit and have it a little bit more unique, but nonetheless yummy. So anyway, I think it was really fun. Now, just as a little side note, remember we talked about the higher fat meats last week in our vitamin D discussion. And so, the whole idea of cured higher fat pork products are better than some. So you could certainly get a nitrate-free, good quality bacon and feel like, okay, this is going to be my source of getting my vitamin D, and add it in. I know you can't believe I'm saying that because I'm not a big fan of animal fats, but if that's something that you love, you want to have it on your best foods list, that's how you think about it. How do I get it to go from good to great? It's good because you like it. It's great if we learn about how to pick the best quality of product. Yes, ma'am. Yes, and I talked about that on my Essay Live show. We were doing a quiz of how much do you know? And really what I said on that note is turkey bacon is not healthier than pork. So just eat the one you like, get the highest quality by the ingredients that are used in its processing, because turkey in itself is not any healthier. It's slightly lower in fat, but we're eating that product because of its fat, you know? So great question, Thyra. Okay, so I'll go down to my next category. So again, we're looking at where do we get all of those 9 B vitamins, and how do we work them into our best foods list? So the next one, or it's not going to surprise you, it is legumes. So what do I mean by legumes?
Beans.
Yes, beans. The perfect food, right? So legumes. Legumes are a great source of B vitamins. And just as an aside, like I said, I want to use one more week on the Bs because there's so many. This is an overview, so I'm not going to get you all the little details about where you get B1, B2, B3, because I want you to see the big picture of it, how it really moves into your best foods list. So legumes are rock stars. So how could we incorporate beans or even lentils or split peas into our day? Well, you could even start with this in the morning. There's a very popular breakfast taco that includes eggs and beans. So there's a combination that would really work. How could we take it from good to great? Well, we could really look for maybe homemade beans where we've added some bright colored spices, maybe lower in salt, no sugar added, right? That would really up the quality of the beans. Lately, what I've been doing is doing a combination of beans and lentils together, because what we've learned is that beans are low in a couple of the amino acids. So if we combine it with a grain or a lentil, so rice, now we've got a perfect protein to go with our beans. We're getting our B vitamins. We're getting our vitamin D from the egg. It's high fat, so it's helping with the absorption of the fat solubles, right? And we're doing very little processing because the beans can come from a can, or better yet, from the dried state, and you made them from scratch. You follow me? So I really want you to see how we put these foods together and make them easy to blend into our daily meal planning. Next one is citrus. So citrus foods are rich in B vitamins. So citrus is also rich in vitamin D, and that's because they supplement it for us, right? Oranges don't naturally have vitamin D, even though it's the sunshine fruit, which is kind of interesting. But citrus is a great source of the B vitamins. So if we think about creating that meal, the citrus does lots of things. It helps the body absorb the iron from the foods. It helps the body absorb the B vitamins as well as the D. So pretty cool. Combinations rock. So when we talk about your best foods list and I talk about the company that the food keeps, this is where it's all about, because when you do the food combining, you're really getting improved absorption of these different vitamins. Okay, we've got a couple more. And you're going to quickly see that there's some superfoods that keep popping up in all of these food lists. The next one that I'm going to write down is a fat. It comes in a leathery shell. That was so easy, right? Avocado, yes. Huge superfood. So there again, even on my Essay Live show, they said, well, how can you improve on a breakfast taco? And it was kind of a, impromptu question on camera, and I said, add avocado, right? Because not very many places that you get a breakfast taco do they add fresh avocado, right? So yes, that would be a great way to improve its quality. Even if we didn't have a nice fresh avocado, what would be another option? It's just got a little insurance around it because you can see that it's good, rather than you buy a avocado from H-E-B and you come home and you wait a couple days, you look at it, you pray for it, right? And then you cut it open, it's no good. It's so frustrating, right? So yeah, the avocado is amazing food. So when we think of our powerhouse foods, that baby is front and center. So again, when we kind of go through its list, not only is it a source of B vitamins, and we also learned last week that it's also going to have a vitamin D. It's a high-fat food, so it's got all those essential fatty acids, right? And so all these things start playing together. And so oftentimes when people say, Suzanne, is this food bad or is this food good? I'll say, well, it depends. What's it being paired with? A similar idea, people ask me about glycemic index, and they'll say, is this food high glycemic index? And I will say, well, it depends. What are you pairing it with? Because that makes all the difference. So we love avocado. And then lastly, I've already kind of alluded to this one, but that is high in B vitamins are going to be meat, fish, and poultry. Okay, so again, B vitamins are everywhere. We've talked about grains, we've talked about citrus, we've talked about legumes, and of course, healthy fats and meat and poultry. So it's probably pretty easy to meet our requirements unless too many of the foods are processed. So that's really the takeaway when we start thinking about B vitamins, because truly what we want to do is make sure that we have all of the nutrients available in our bloodstream. I call it our chemical soup, so that as we're going through the day, our body can pull what it needs from our bloodstream, so it doesn't have to rely on our reserves. So when we lose calcium from our bone, because the body is noticing that there's too little calcium in the bloodstream, the vitamin D starts to be activated. It pulls calcium from the bones. That's our reserves. That's not good. We want to always put into our reserves. And so having enough vitamin D to orchestrate that process, in addition to having enough phosphorus and calcium, right? Vitamin B, the whole B complex, is so important for all the systems to work well. So they work in concert. So we know that B vitamins, the B complex, is really important in vision. So the health of our retina. I've talked about brain function. We even have a lot of things around appetite and digestion, because each cell requires the B vitamins in that Krebs cycle. So absolutely on digestion and appetite and brain function. Of course, muscle tone, heart health, and hormones. So our muscular system. Of course, I talked a little bit about the hormone systems. All absolutely require one or more of those B vitamins. Yes, ma'am.
So the hormones, and most of us, we're breast cancer, so.
Yes.
And mine was estrogen positive, so my fear is I don't want to have too much. So can you have too much of that would cause your
Yes.
estrogen?
And that's, okay, so the B complex is pretty hard to get too much.
Okay.
But yes, you can. Right, it's water soluble, so it's pretty hard to get too much. However, the literature does say that you can supplement with too much. So even though it's water soluble, remember your body works in concert. So somehow we've got to excrete extra supplementation. So the most common that we see when we look at the research is neuropathy, so damage of the nerves when there's too much B going on. And again, we could get really specific and talk which B, but I like to just keep it together because I don't recommend anybody take a separate B supplement. If you're going to supplement, do a complex, especially if you have some of these issues. So if you have underlying conditions like celiac, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's, anything around the irritable bowel syndrome and rheumatoid arthritis. So celiac, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's, IBS, and RA. When you have those pre-existing conditions, right, our digestion is affected. The lining of our small intestine is affected so that it's not able to absorb the nutrients that we need, right? So we have to find another route for administration. We also try increase volume, hoping that some of it will stick. And that's where the supplementation is most important. If you know you have some GI issues that are making it difficult for optimum absorption. But again, in general, when you eat a well-balanced diet, you shouldn't have to supplement. And it's truly hard to know when you do. How do you know when you should supplement? Again, insurance is a good idea if you have any of these. So rheumatoid arthritis is part of a big class of autoimmune, right? So a lot of these are autoimmune. So we know that it's so closely tied to the health of our hormones and our cardiovascular as well as our brain function. So the neurochemistry of it all and how the nerves are really affected. So, this is where getting a good blood panel and understanding some of the signs and symptoms so that we can decide, do we need to supplement? Because that's going to be a decision for you to have with your doctor and your dietitian to really understand where are the cues, where are the symptoms that we want to address. Okay, and so I mentioned too much. The peripheral neuropathy is really mainly noted with excess B6. So the best idea is if you're going to supplement with Bs, get a B complex. And that way, remember I talked about in the beginning, the amounts vary so much, like order of magnitude of how much B cobalamin you need, which is B12, and thiamine. There's a huge range, a milligram and micrograms. So instead of having to memorize all that, the complex, if you want to do it, is the way to go. So it already has set that ratio up of those. Another one that's an issue with excess is folate. If you've ever been diagnosed with anemia, there's two different kinds of anemia. There's B12, so pernicious anemia, and generalized anemia, where you don't have enough red blood cells or you don't have enough hemoglobin and a hematocrit. And if you supplement thinking that, well, I'm anemic, I should take folate, then and iron, the problem is you could be covering up the real problem with the anemia, which could be B12. So getting lab work and working with your doc and looking at what foods you eat and what history, what medical history you have will be really helpful to really pinpoint the best approach. Okay, so now the fun part. Let's look at some foods and how much Bs do they actually provide. So I'm gonna have to start with one of my favorites, which is tofu. Golly darn it, sorry. Has anybody experimented with tofu lately?
I'm gonna try it in my air fryer.
Hey,
I got
good.
An air fryer that has a recipe for it.
I love it.
So I like it crispy.
You like it crispy? Yeah, the texture of tofu is a real big deal. I just went to a Thai food restaurant last night, and I was so excited to try the tofu stir fry. It was terrible. I'm sure that it was deep fried and fried again. It was, I couldn't even eat it. I said, I want the dish with the most vegetables. And so the lady made that recommendation. And I had like 3 bean sprouts and a massive tofu that was made completely wrong. I'm the worst person to go out to eat with. I know it. So tofu. So in 1 cup, how much are we getting? We get 36% of the daily value of B1. That's pretty good just for a start, but I won't stop there. 20% of our daily value of B2 in that same 1 cup of tofu. 20% of B9. 15% of B6. This is still in that 1 cup, you guys. And then 100% of B12 because it's usually fortified. So in the 1 cup of tofu that's fortified for us vegans, right? They make sure they add some B12 in there. And then you get a pretty good amount of all the other B vitamins. Well, not all of them, but most. And we're not going to eat just tofu, right? What are we going to put with it? We're going to, right, veggies, unlike that crazy restaurant I was at. We're going to put a whole grain like rice. We're going to put some leafy greens. We're going to put some oil. Hopefully some healthy oil, maybe even a little salmon. And so now we've got this fabulous stir fry that's covering a hefty amount just looking at that 1 cup of that food. So to me, that makes it exciting. It's like, I think we could do this. I think we could do this. Even if you didn't have a strong appetite, say you made the tofu with a variety of things and you had 1 cup total, it's still going to add up really nicely if you pick your bright leafy greens and, of course, adding in the whole grains. So I was excited to see that one. Here's another one. one of my other favorite foods is split pea. I love, Paula, that a while back you put this really cute post on Facebook about Suzanne's split pea, and
I took a picture of it.
it made me so happy because the more employees I have at Paris Bakery, the more I realize that that's actually hard to cook. It takes patience and just watching it and giving it a little prayer because it burns, it boils over, it gets too thick, it gets too thin, right? But pea soup, I'm telling you, split pea is a rock star. Split.
Well, and some people, they've only tried it like out of a can.
Yes.
You know, the Campbell's and stuff like that. But boy, there's nothing like your homemade.
I know.
And that's what I was trying to tell people.
It was so sweet. I kept that one. That's just adorable. But you don't think of it as being a superfood. It's a humble pea, and it's as cheap as you can imagine. You can buy them organic now, which, I think it triples the price. So it goes from $1 to $3 for a bag, and so it's a great way to eat on pennies and get a powerhouse of nutrients. So in 1 cup of split pea soup, you get 35% of your B1, 25% of your B9, 20% of all of the following: B2, 6, and 12. And that's not fortified in 1 cup. I mean, you gotta love it. Anybody hate split pea soup? Be honest. Yeah? I like that.
Well, if it's vegetarian, probably I would eat it.
Yes.
I don't want that.
Yes. So yeah, no ham and bacon. I'm with you, Rachel. My mom raised us with the ham hock in there and peas and onions and all that other stuff. And now I just pure split peas with a bay leaf or 2. I love the flavor of bay leaf in split pea. It just marries beautifully. So I hope you'll try it and get excited about it because
This is exciting. I love your tofu.
no.
You gotta try it the right way.
So both of these are a no-go for you? Oh, darn. Okay, do I have a better one? The next one you're going to like. The next one you're going to like. Well, because remember I mentioned that B vitamins are ubiquitous. It means that you get them in a lot of things, even fortified foods. So my goal in putting up these last 2 items is for you to think outside the box, because you have a better chance at getting items that are not heavily processed if you go this route. Now, the good news is the next one is cooked beef. So who doesn't like beef? We're in Texas, right? Beef is a source of B vitamins. Rachel, she's like, no, I don't like that one. And I've learned by, being in the food industry for the last 30 years, you can't please everybody all the time. So some of the people, some of the time. But cooked beef is going to be one that will certainly work. So it's easy to take beef from good to great. Give me some examples. How might we do that? The company that it keeps. So with our beef, we're going to make it a stir fry. And we're going to add in some broccoli and some kale. All these are also high in B vitamins because they're leafy greens. We could add in what? Give me some ideas. What would we put in our beef stir fry? Good. In your favorite Chinese? Yes. Chinese food. Think of beef. Bok choy. Yes. Yes. Carrots. Corn. There's our whole grain. Kale, yeah. So, and then you're going to serve it with a side of rice, or you could even do the organic brown rice noodles. Yes, they are processed rice, but they have also been fortified. So, if you don't like rice or you don't want to take the time to cook it, and again, rice is another one of those things that is quite hard to cook correctly, try the rice noodles. Rice noodles are pretty darn good. Okay?
But like for the beef, is it? I mean, I'm sure you want the leanest type of beef that there is, but does it matter how? How when you buy meat, it'll say whether or not if it's how they were fed.
Yeah, that's a great question. We talked about that a little bit with our vitamin D discussion, and they like to say that grass-fed animals are going to have more of those vitamins in their flesh because remember it's fat soluble. So if they eat clover and they eat really beautiful alfalfa, they're going to have more nutrients stored. But I also feel like if you get just a medium fat meat, I think the grass-fed trend tends to be quite high in fat. And honestly, we can't be sure that they're getting all the best clover. I mean, look at how dry the fields are lately. I don't see a whole lot of clover growing. So, I mean, I feel like you're probably better off getting just a good quality, maybe organic. The Wagyu beef I've seen at HEB. Yeah, pricey, but it's coming from a single origin. And so if that's important to you, then you got that as an option, going from good to great. And the company that the food keeps is so critical, because remember the fat soluble vitamins, and then we also get the B vitamins, and then you want to add in the high vitamin C and the fiber. So we're also taking good care of the gut, because we know that if the gut is healthy, it's going to absorb the nutrients better, and we're definitely going to have better elimination patterns, so that now we've got a healthier overall body. Okay? So in the last couple minutes that we have, I want to share with you, I was going to print it out and it sounds like our printer didn't work. I'm going to share with you what I did for my vitamin D. I think I can, yes. Oh, you do? Do you have the sure, that would be great. Yeah, you're going to get a little handout then. But I wanted to share with you what I did on my 5 days of getting vitamin D. Did anybody else do this? No? You have? Okay. Did you find anything new, Laura? Any wow?
Well, no.
Okay.
No, but when I did it, it was because I have kind of bad bones.
Yeah.
So my deal is I wanted to make sure I was getting enough vitamin D to help with that. So
Good.
my calculation was only to be able to see that, okay, I am getting what I need.
Sure.
It
Well,
wasn't about it. This was months, maybe a year ago.
Gotcha. Well, and so the good news is it gains awareness. And so when I did my tracking, remember I said that we wanted 20 minutes of sun 3 times a week. And I read some articles that kind of go back and forth that say you can get your vitamin D either from a supplement or from food or from sun. It's all the same. And I just don't know that I agree with that. I really feel like the way our bodies work best, because you get added bonus from being outside in the sun. I mean, it's so relaxing. On Sunday, I was just thinking about you guys and just loving every moment of being in the sun with as much skin exposed as I could, just for a small period of time, and it's almost freeing, because how many years we've been told not to be in the sun. And so I thought it was fabulous. So on my day 1, which was Wednesday, I had an egg, I had Ezekiel toast.
What is Ezekiel toast?
Yeah, it's just a sprouted grain bread.
That you buy?
It's in the freezer section. The brand is actually called Food for Life, and they make lots of different things, not just bread.
Okay.
Food for Life.
Oh, okay. I know what you're talking about now.
Yeah, it's been around a long time. Yeah.
I didn't know where to find it, and they're like, it's in the freezer.
In the
section.
freezer. Now,
Bread.
at Trader Joe's, they don't freeze it.
Okay.
I don't know why that would be. Okay, so I had my egg, Ezekiel toast. I had butter. Right? Yay for butter. And so I was trying to add up on my vitamin D sources. So that was breakfast. And then for my lunch, I had tuna salad. And I had broccoli, and I had pumpkin seeds mixed in with the tuna. And I had olive oil in the salad. So again, big picture. We don't really need to track every microgram, because we know that it's pretty easy. In fact, I read one article that said if you eat 2 eggs a day, that meets your needs for the whole day. Now, I don't know if all of us want to eat 2 eggs every day, but we can alternate. A couple of days a week, have some eggs. A couple of days a week, have a fish, a fatty fish. So I did tuna, and I also did salmon on a previous day. For the dinner here, I did a fermented food. I had tempeh, E-H, tempeh. And with that, I had quinoa and kale. So I just did a little stir fry, and that made my total. And remember, it depends on if you're following it by IUs, international units, or milligrams. So whatever little app you use, but it got me to my total. So I was pretty glad that I got my sunshine and my food requirements in the day. Let me show you one more. Anybody want to help me like plan a day? Yeah? So
What are you seasoning all this with? One of your seasonings?
yes, in fact, in your handout, I gave you a recipe for salmon. So my big send out right now is our beautiful spices. And so I gave you a recipe for the chicken joe spice used in a salmon dish. So it's got, can you see it okay? I know the one page didn't look good that was in my, was my food list. Yeah, that one you don't look at. That's the one we're showing you right now. But all the other ones you should be able to see fine. But the joe spice is great because it has seeds that we don't normally use. So a little bit of coriander, a little bit of fennel, dill, and then fresh ground pepper. It doesn't have any salt. And so then you get to add your own salt. And I like that because now you can add as much kick as you want, and it's not constrained by keeping the salt low. And then in the recipe I also gave you has layers of orange, so citrus and orange. It's got a little bit of olive oil. It tells you how to cook it, so make sure you can see that recipe. And if not, I'll ask Jose, maybe we can post it on the e-blast so you can see just the recipe.
It won't be fishy?
The trick with that is do not overcook your salmon. So notice there in the recipe, I told you how long to cook it, and then you let it rest in the oven for another 6 minutes. Because it's, and
it shouldn't be fishy. If it smells fishy or something, that's bad.
something's wrong. It's usually that it's overcooked. Yeah.
But you don't buy anything that smells fishy.
Yes, and such a good point. So right when you buy it, smell it. Before you cook it, rinse it and dry it. Okay, and then don't eat the skin, but it's okay to cook with the skin because the skin will give it a barrier. Yeah, no, you can take it off if you want, Miss Paula. But the idea is that salmon is a food that I want you to use at least a few times a month. And then plan out your week so you have those big ticket items for vitamin D and the B complex vitamins kind of spread out. So my homework for you now is I want you to plan a day that really recognizes those superfoods that offer vitamin D and the B complex vitamins. So it's an easy one because I mentioned that, the B complex is ubiquitous. It's in all food groups. But really what's going to be key is for you to pick out foods that you already like, that you feel like, okay, I could do this and get our minimum requirements met. And then the most fun is to get outside and enjoy a little bit of sunshine and have fun while you're doing it because it's absolutely beautiful right now. So yes, so thank you so much for joining, and let's ask some questions.